How you doing? Coach Winchester here at CrossFit Jääkarhu. I want to go over the air squat today with you guys. Air squat is one of the most fundamental and one of the most basic things that we teach here, and it's going to be one of the most important skills that you develop on your way to increase performance. So what we're looking at with the air squat for points of performance is we're going to look at where the feet are. They should be right outside the shoulders. Your toes should be at 11 and 1. We're going to ask you to break the hip before you break the knees, and I'll show you what that means in a second. You're going to sit your butt directly between your heels. You're going to keep your chest tall, eyes straight ahead on the horizon. You're going to try to get your hip crease below your knees if possible and if safe. And finally, you're going to keep your knees in line with your toes at all times. So what we're looking for, once again, in terms of the squat, we want our setup to be fairly comfortable. Feet right outside the shoulders. Toes can point slightly out. Think of a clock, the hands on a clock. If you get your feet at 11 and 1 o'clock, we think you'll be doing just good, okay? What we're looking for, step number 2, we're gonna ask you to break at the hip. So all that means is push the hips back slightly. From the side, you can see, I'm gonna push my hips back slightly, and then from there, I'm gonna keep my chest tall, eyes straight ahead, sit, hips down low, knees in the same line as the toes, and then come back to standing. All right, some common faults that we see with the air squat. One of the most common faults I see is that people break at the knee before they break at the hip. So what this means is that they tend to push their knees forward before they begin to sit. So with this, when this happens, you end up seeing people with knees real far forward and maybe their heels even come up off the ground. It's hard for them to then find their depth in the squat. Real good fix for that is just having somebody maybe have them over-exaggerate the movement a little bit and have them imagine that they're trying to push their hips back into an imaginary wall and then try to sit down with a nice tall chest. It's a really good fix for that. Another common fault that we see is that the chest and or the eyes tend to drop towards the ground. So what you'll see is this right here. Now this can be due to mobility issues, or it could just be a proprioception where they don't know where to look or how to keep their chest. So if you were to come in front of them and put your hand in front of them and have them try to avoid hitting your hand with hands high, then that's going to be a good correction for that. Or even have them stand in front of a wall. That'll be a good correction for having the chest and the eyes drop. So another common fault that we see is depth in the squat. We like to have our athletes squat as deep as they can safely. For most of our healthy, strong athletes, that's below parallel. But there are reasons that people cannot squat below parallel. One could be mobility issues. The other big reason is proprioception. Once again, an athlete just doesn't understand where their body is in space. A really good way to fix it if it's a proprioceptive issue is to simply put a target for them to squat to. For example, a medicine ball under their butt until they learn what correct squat depth is. And if it's a mobility issue, then you're going to have to look at their hips, their ankles, look at their movement patterns and try to get them fixed up from that angle. The last thing, another current common fault that we see is valgus knee, where the knees tend to collapse in the squat here. This could be for a couple different reasons, either imbalances or tightnesses or weaknesses in the body. If the knees tend to collapse in, even in an air squat, what I like to do for my athletes is have them grab one of these bands and put it around the tops of their knees, step into it. And that right there is going to provide an immediate resistance, which is going to allow them to help drive out against the force and hopefully correct the issue over time, also strengthening some of the hip stabilizers. That's the air squat. Some considerations when you're looking at air squat, when you're looking at what people look like, what your athletes or clients look like in the air squat. 4 big ones. Mobility of an athlete or mobility of a client, the stability, right? That's going to affect a lot of factors in their air squat. Limb length and proprioception. So limb length is one of the biggest factors when you're trying to compare two athletes. Athletes with similar limb lengths should look similar in their air squat, assuming that their motor patterns are the same or similar. If athletes have longer femurs, shorter torsos, shorter femurs, then their squats are going to look vastly different. So it's important to keep those considerations in mind when you're looking at your athletes, trying to provide cues and trying to get them into their ideal squat setup.